IMHO Talk Show. Tell a friend, tell a friend. Live and in living color. We online today, y'all. Got to give the people what they want as always. Sir Charles, Miss Max, WVAI 101 Jams, number one for R&B, hip hop, and classics. And today's show, like I said, you don't want to miss. We're going to edutain as you have grown to love from the IMHO fam. And so much good news. We got to share the word on the street with y'all because Charlottesville is on and popping right about now. A lot of great events that we should be aware of coming up. We're gonna let you know about that. And got to hit those headlines and that you've grown to love. And so we're gonna take a quick break, but wanted to let y'all know that you still got a minute to tune in, tell a friend, tell the family, because like I mentioned with the events, we're going to kick off the show with the Legal Aid Justice Center's Joe Platania as well as Harold Foley. They're going to be talking about the expungement clinic, another expungement clinic coming up. So we got to be informed and aware of all that's going on for folks that we may know that may be incarcerated, about to be released, or those who have been released. Got to give good updates and talk about the community forum for the expungement clinic coming up. Second hour, we're going to be joined by none other than Albemarle County Public Schools' own Superintendent Dr. Matthew Haas. It's a heated election coming up, y'all. It's a lot of agendas on the table, and Dr. Haas has been under some fire recently. So we're gonna get to talk to him and see where his mindset is at, and the vision and the focus right now for Albemarle County Public Schools. It's in light of that event that we co-hosted with the Charlottesville United for Public Education, along with our CIM partners, Vinegar Hill, Charlottesville Tomorrow. We did that over at the Jefferson with the city schools, and a lot of folks were wondering about a forum for the county. So this is just one step in that direction where we talk to the head honcho, Dr. Haas, going to be in, and also a new brother that's going to help us close the show today. New brother to the community, none other than Jay Simple. Been doing a lot of big things on the arts front for the city. Great arts initiatives and programs going on at the Bridge. He is the new executive director for the Bridge PAI. And I can't wait to pick his brain and just delve into all the abstract thinking and all the great ideas and things he has going on. So IMHO Talk Show, without further ado, we here, y'all. We still standing. We'll be right back. Tell a friend, tell a friend. IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
HO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
HO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
And so you have to be informed. I use a lot of analogies. When we talk about policies, I use this analogy, the bulldozer at the door effect. And that means when the bulldozer's at the door, it's too late, right? And so when you are informed and you're moving through your understanding the local politics and policies, you can have that voice to speak out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You good? Oh, you can continue. Are you good?
I'm good.
Kicking at the joke.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
I gave him that look. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I have a little different take on that personally. So I'm the elected Commonwealth's attorney for the city of Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constitutional office. So there's sheriff, treasurer, clerk of court, Commonwealth's attorney, and commissioner of the revenue. I think there's 5 constitutional offices. So all the time people are like thinking prosecutors work for the police or work for victims, or we and I don't. I answer every 4 years to the citizens and the voters of the city of Charlottesville. That's who I work for.
Right.
So another important thing about elections is, I work for the voters. I work for the people. They're my boss. And so I think
that's important.
It's really important. And people need to understand that's why it matters for you to go vote. Like, these elected officials work for your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important. And they should have a say in it. And, people like Harold and others hold them accountable. And then also we're going to get to the expungement clinic, but there's elections for House of Delegates and State Senate. These are the people that write the laws on what can and can't be expunged. And it's an important thing. And Harold and others have done some great work to get legislation passed. But if we want to broaden expungement, which a lot of us want to, myself included, we need elected delegates and senators that are going to help us change the law in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then let me ask you this, though, because I had to look this up. Why is that so? Why is there such an oversight so many times of when it comes to our elected officials, or even not even just elected officials? You can even go into positions who are created to serve, right, the greater good, to serve the Commonwealth. A lot of times, like, that gets lost, right? And people look at it, they call it career politicians sometimes, right? People doing what they have to do just to stay in office. And I'm not even sure like what perspective you want to, or viewpoint you want to take on that answer, but I'm curious, like how you are able to keep that in mind, because I was happy to hear you say that, on how like you work for the people, but there's so many of our officials who sort of lose sight of who they work for.
Well, I think there's 2 things. The biggest and most important thing is, I think, making sure that you continue to be humble and understand it's a privilege to serve. And that's easy to pay lip service to. Oh, I'm humble. I want to be humble. Well, all right, show me. Where's the proof about your humility? Like, how are you acting out the words that you're saying? And what we try and do, and we're getting back to after COVID, is to have people in our office, especially prosecutors, out interacting with the community. I mean, you just rattled off a ton of cool stuff that's going on. We're all interconnected.
That's right.
We're all interconnected. And so we have our prosecutors, like, going to court and doing that sort of stuff. It's part of the job. But the other part of the job, and maybe the most important part, to answer your question and to spread the word and to educate folks and introduce ourselves and answer questions and maybe hear some props, but maybe hear some criticisms, is to be out in the community, talking to people, doing stuff. Chief Kachis, our new chief of police, does community walks every Thursday. Our prosecutors are out, walking neighborhoods with them, talking to folks, answering questions. So I think part of it is us getting the word out a little more. And then I think people listening to a show like this, where you're pushing that message out and educating folks, is important.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, just trying to piggyback off of your comments just now. When you talk about criticisms, particularly of your office, if you could be completely candid, what are probably, or what is the biggest criticism that you're receiving right now, maybe of your position itself or of your office, and how you're working to, change that?
Well, I think one of the things that's been, and maybe Harold would be better to, answer it, but you asked me, and I think one of the things that we always have to keep an eye on is why are we prosecuting someone? What are we prosecuting them for? And there's a bunch of different ways prosecutions can end. Is jail a first option or a last resort? Is a felony conviction when someone doesn't need a felony a first option or a last resort? Diversion, drug treatment court, therapeutic docket, restorative justice. What are we doing to look at sort of on the front end, not even getting people pulled into the system? Because Harold knows all too well, once you're in the system, it's so tough to get out of it, even, you know, after the conviction and it's on your record and probation. So I think a legitimate criticism that is kind of continuous is us looking on the front end, the decisions we make, and doing a good job of understanding the consequences for the decisions we make, and just being mindful of that and not always getting that right. So I think there's some criticism about, you know, maybe something's over prosecuted or you were too punitive. So I think that's kind of a general thing we always try and keep our eye on.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess I was also going to respond to that little tidbit, because I'm wondering if that criticism comes from the inside, you know, the individuals that you're working with, the police department, the judicial system, judges and things like that, or if this is coming from the community members.
I think probably that's more of the community. You just made me think of another criticism. I would say we get, I'm not saying it's not legitimate, we get some pushback and criticism from law enforcement that as an office, we're too lenient. And they say, well, people can do whatever and you don't hold them accountable. You don't do anything. And so there's a tension there, right? Like one side, you know, wants less, one side wants more, and it's our job to balance it. And that's our job. But we sometimes do get pushback like, well, you don't do anything and people can just, you know, do whatever they want in Charlottesville and aren't held accountable. So it's a tightrope. We don't always get it right. But I think those are some criticisms that, you know, we need to be aware of and try and be attentive to. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you for that.
Well, no, I you know, one of the things I work on is decarceration, right? We can talk about it. They talking about building this, remodeling the jail, and what folks don't know, since the beginning of the pandemic, the population of jail folks staying in the jail had dropped tremendously, right? And dropped even more during the pandemic. And that was because of Joe and Jim figuring their way out to decarcerate, not put people in jail. What I know about prison and jails is it doesn't help anyone, right? If that community got some support systems can help that person to not reoffend, I think that's what we should focus our money and time in, right? Because it costs someone to be incarcerated $26,000, $30,000 a year, right? You know, and if you multiply by all those people who are incarcerated, that's a lot of money that could just be going back to the community. So I'm always going to be talking about decarceration. Joe know I'm always pushing to, I'll be honest with you, during the pandemic, the People's Coalition actually asked Joe and Jim and some other folks to reduce the population in the jail so people won't get sick from COVID. You know, and I think Joe worked with the People's Coalition and we worked together to help that decarceration and also find folks places that some folks didn't have homes to go to. We found places for them to lay their heads. So for me, it's like we got to reimagine how we prosecute and what criminal justice look like in the future.
Yeah. Now that's important. So let's have that conversation, right? Because you made me think about sort of what Joe was saying a minute ago about how it's your job to sort of meet halfway and figure out the best solutions regardless of which side you're on, right? So Harold, like you even made me think about the whole defund movement, right? And I get your point of not wanting these grandiose incarceration facilities, you know, there's such a that would be such an eyesore really, to the community, and it's almost like a beacon, right, of saying this is where we put people, right? So I get all that, but please allow the conversation to consider like the opposite end of the spectrum of what can be done to make sure that incarceration does mean rehabilitation, right? Or how, and it even makes me think about the whole like defund the police kind of thing. It's like, so in so many instances you need police, but you don't want to empower police to keep, committing atrocities on Black communities and neighborhoods, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so like, so where's that balance in what you're saying of let's get people out,
Mhm.
but at the same time they need their rehabilitation? Or fact is, there are some people who need to be separated and whatever that looks like from society because they could be detriments to their families or their communities. Like, so where's the middle ground?
Well, this is the thing I want to say about when people talk about defunding the police.
Mhm.
They've been defunding education. They've been defunding everything that is possible that holds people's safety net for years. So the only thing we doing is we just put a label on it. But when you talk about legislators, they be like, oh, well, we can't fund this educational thing, right? But we go fund this. That's defunding, moving money around. But you're right. It is a balance, right? Because, some people do, cause really harm to the community, right? But I say to this, what is the reason for them doing that, right?
Right.
And it always end up being a substance abuse or mental health problem, right? That is not dealt with in the community because we don't have the funding for it. So that's why.
Economic problem. People act out because they don't have
economic, right? Business, right? We talk about Vinegar Hill. It devastated the Black community. We still haven't got businesses like we supposed to have because of what happened, right? And that was all about funding, right? So when you talk about defunding, please think about the other things that also is happening that is being defunded in our community.
Right. Absolutely. Joe, I'd be happy to hear, your perspective from a legal standpoint when it comes to, to the human rights side, but also sort of the security side. Right?
Yeah. Also, that conversation, listening to Harold, just made me think of something about criticism. So one of the things I've reflected on is Jim Hingley. We keep talking about, he's the elected prosecutor in the county of Albemarle. Jim hired me when he was opening the public defender's office in 1998. So I worked for Jim for 5 years. He's a mentor of mine. And we did look at the folks that were being incarcerated when COVID hit. And we took steps along with a lot of other partners, judges and defense attorneys and, community activists and the People's Coalition. And we did reduce the jail population during COVID. And so the question was, and things went just fine with community safety. So then the question was, well, why were they there in the first place, prosecutor? And so I think we've continued to ask ourselves, and Jim said this, let's not go back to doing business the old way. And then just COVID's passed, we can ramp the numbers back up again. So I think that was a legitimate criticism of the two prosecutors' offices. And I think Jim would agree with me, like, okay, this new model is working. Maybe incarcerating less folks doesn't really adversely affect community safety. The other thing is, there are people. So I always say to our office, the culture we try and create is community safety balanced with the fair treatment of someone charged with a crime. And we are responsible as prosecutors for keeping the community safe.
Right.
And there are some folks that I personally believe need to be removed from society for a period of time for their own safety and the safety of the community. But what is happening to them and what are they doing while they're incarcerated? And Harold said it's right. It doesn't really help anyone when folks are over in the jail. It doesn't really make anything better. In fact, it may contribute to problems related to long-term housing and employment and different things like that, family relationships. So I think that's where we need to look at what rehabilitative programs are at the jail that folks can take advantage of while they're there: substance abuse, mental health disorders, education, to try that when they do re-enter and are returning citizens and are back in the community, that we've had some transition and some resources available so they don't just come back in plunk with no lifelines. And I think we can do a better job of that. We haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah. So that lends the question, and Harold, you may have a point on this. Well, both of y'all really. But when you look at like the current prison system, right? Do we believe that's where the solution is capable of residing, or is it going to take the community organizations such as the many that you are a part of, Harold, to sort of like rehabilitate or to help with the reentry process? You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us look at our criminal justice system and just see it as broken, like when it comes to the way that Black men and particularly get profiled and things of that sort, and then seeing sort of like the cycle and the pipeline, of when it comes to the prison system. So I'm curious on if you all are hopeful that system can be reconstructed, or is it going to take the community organizations to grab those hands, when they come back in?
Yeah, no, I'll give you a good example. I have a fellow, legal aid. We hired organizing fellows, and one of the stipulations is that, they had to be formerly incarcerated, right? My fellow was telling me a story about his reentry program that he went to in Dillon, I think. And he got there, and the lady said, how many of y'all are here gonna get out next month? Mm. He said, I'll get out in 2 weeks. She said, okay, here, give him the book and say, good luck, right? Mm. That's what we have in the system. It's not really going to help anyone coming out. So yes, I think it is up to a lot of like nonprofit organization for profits to go in to talk to folks, right? For instance, I know some organizations going to the juvenile facilities to have conversation. I'm going into the juvenile facilities to have conversations. And the first thing I tell them is, come see me when you get out, right? Because no one else is going to help them. I always say this, people with lived experience is the best people to move issues, right? So you can't really move an issue if you've never been incarcerated, because you don't know what the issue really is. And what I realized too is, like, the younger generation, if we don't help them realize how important they are, our future is not going to look bright, right? And so, I always look for those ones that is like ostracized or say they, you're not, fit for community, because I was one of those guys, right? It took me years, to get where I'm at, but I want to also help someone else. I always say this to everybody. When I break the ceiling, I want everyone to come up the ceiling, because I think that's the way we should ride.
I like that. So we do have a question from the audience.
Yeah, this listener is curious to know from both guests your perspective on the vision you hold for restorative justice in Central Virginia.
So I'll answer that. Can I push back on one thing Harold just said? Sure. So Harold, you said there's no one there to help them. We do locally, and I'm not sure it's perfect, but we have a reentry council. And I think that our probation officers and the pretrial and post-trial court services folks at Offender Aid and Restoration, the great work that Tez and the Fountain Fund are doing, the Uhuru Foundation, there are a lot of resources locally, like you were lifting up some of the different things going on. There are a lot of different resources locally that are trying to be there to help folks when they get out. And the pop-up clinics and the Expungement Council. There's a decarceration and reentry clinic at the University of Virginia run by Kelly Orions, I think is her name. So there's stuff going, but I think Harold also hit on a point. I am not an individual that has that lived experience. And I think folks that have those lived experiences have the most credibility and legitimacy and knowledge to do that work. But I feel like we do have some good resources locally. Absolutely. The answer to that question.
Wait a minute, I want to push back on you, Joe.
Please, is that okay?
I never said locally. I said in the system.
Okay.
I'm not. I know it's a ton of things locally, right? But if you in the system and you get out, you still have to find those things. It's nothing in the system saying, "Hey, you should go there, A, B, and C." That's what I was talking about.
I got you.
So what do both of you think about the jail expansion?
You asking me?
Both of you.
Well, I want to be very careful. I don't think it's a jail expansion. Jim Hingley and I came out very strongly to say, because the architects were like, now is the time when we can expand and add more beds. Now is the time to do this when we're there doing this project. And we both came out very strongly and very publicly to say, we are totally opposed to expansion. We're totally opposed to adding more beds. We're for jail improvement to the extent that prosecutors have a voice in the process. But we were very clear, and they're like, well, populations are rising and crime trends are going to go up in the next 10 or 20 years. And we said, no, we feel like we can responsibly keep the community safe and not expand it. I'll turn it over to Harold there's still a lot of controversy on the improvements that are going to be made to the jail. I'm hopeful that it's in beds for folks with mental health issues and substance use disorders. So I'm hopeful it becomes, for folks that have to be there, a more humane place with more humane resources and programming to help them. But I'll kick it over to Harold for.
Yeah, no, Joe is right. Joe can tell you about the process to make sure that the beds wouldn't expand. I'm sorry. But for me, and the books that I'm like dealing with, and most of them, a couple of them are like former incarcerated. We don't want the expansion. It's not an expansion. I'm sorry. They decided they wasn't going to expand, but what they're going to do is build up, right? For us, it is like the Taj Mahal, right? They want these big buildings, and I never heard of jails having rooms. And so that's what's confusing to us. Like, how you going to have a jail? I thought jails had cells, not rooms, right?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, it sounds like psychologically, so it doesn't seem that bad. So if you get in trouble, it ain't gonna be that bad, But that sounds like a psychological.
Yeah, but this the thing though. People, there is a spot over there that they built in 2000 that has 40 pods, but 80 people can be in a pod, right? And they got a couple of them brand new. They don't put no one over there. And the reason why he don't put anybody in there is like he don't have the staff, because he don't know which one is beefing with each other, right? Yeah. But it's been like that for years. You never know who's gonna be with each other anyhow. I was over there. I did a stint over there, right? And so it was that happening, and whatever happens, you have to move on from it. But what I'm saying is a group called the People's Coalition Jail Committee, who's working on stopping the whole spec that he wants, because the spec could be up to $100 million, right? And so they created this design almost 18 months ago, when construction costs are different now, right? So when they did do the estimate cost, it was 49 million. But over 27 years is 73 million. And when I say 23 years, each locality had to pay out the money. They're going to use bonds, but they still have to use their money, their tax money, to pay this back. So right now, well, not right now, they got some money from the state. Before they got the money from the state, the jail didn't have a debt. Now they're going to have a debt for 27 years that community people are going to have to pay back. And so what we at the community be like, hey, we want to make a decision on what we don't want over there.
And, in listening to your description of what the expansion or whatever we're calling it looks like. Renovation. What I also hear is that in order to substantiate the reason, justify the reason for this build, once it's, comes into reality, is there needs to be bodies in those cells or rooms.
That's right.
In order to convince people that this was, a worthy expense or cause. And,
And so some we saying, if you talking like that, do y'all know something we don't know? Right? Do you think there is like, one, I'm not going to say who the board of supervisor person is, but they on the ACLJ board, the Albemarle Charles Regional Jail Board, said, you don't know what the political wind's going to blow in here, right? And I was like, it can blow doo-doo in here. But we shouldn't think about incarcerating more people. And so, and when I say live experience, this person never probably stepped in a jail cell in her life. So,
that's a fact of life that people got to wake up to, is that it's, in many ways, it's a for-profit system too. Let's not confuse ourselves thinking that it's just a service to the community that's just there just in case. There's experiences I won't even go into right now that that prove that it's like there's a for-profit benefit to it for some folks,
especially the phones.
And and I want to make sure that you answer the listener's question as well. That Max asked that she was curious to know the perspective of what the vision hold for restorative justice in Central Virginia. I know Joe touched on it. I don't think you touched on it.
Oh, can I just say I missed it. I just want to say, is that right, Harold?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're starting the third year of our local restorative justice program. And thank you for the question, listener. And I'm sorry, I totally sidetracked us. But there's a wonderful website. It's CVCJ, Central Virginia Community Justice. If you Google that, it's an amazing website. My vision, and I'll kick it over to Harold, is I think we're learning a whole new vocabulary in the criminal legal system where you're not talking about defendants. You're talking about the party that caused harm. You're not saying victim, you're talking about the harmed party. And it's giving both of those individuals agency to come together and do things in a totally non-traditional way where they're able to sit down and try and address and repair the harm without this punitive punishment, conviction-driven mindset. And so my vision is that we start to change the vocabulary that we use to sort of divert more cases to that. And it's going to be a long process, in my opinion.
Yeah, and real quick, Joe, something you said too, the fact that you work to try to get people out of prison would mean that there's grounds, because you've been, like the legal expert here, that means that there's grounds to where maybe these people shouldn't have been incarcerated in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. Of the fact that when you talk about, the restorative and the reformation of it all, of us, even if we weren't trying to renovate the jail, the fact that we need people like Joe working to see, all right, what people can we, bring back to their families? Yeah, exactly. Like what people can still be contributing to our community, and instead of an overreaching, criminal justice system that's keeping them in there.
And the one interesting, this is a legal wonky thing, but it's called a pre-plea system. So to do restorative justice, the person charged doesn't have to plead guilty or admit they did anything. And we've got all sorts of protections in place so it can't be used against them what they say. So it's a pre-plea system. So you don't have to plead guilty or have a conviction for the most part. And it's aspirationally for straight dismissal, misdemeanors and felonies. So not everything has to say, well, at the end of the day, we'll let you work it down to a misdemeanor. That if it goes well in the most ideal situation, it's a pure dismissal. So that's also a benefit.
Well, we trying to get that in the drug court too.
We are.
That's right. Because folks had to plead guilty to something, but then, they work their way through it. But once you plead guilty to a felony, it's hard to get a job. Yeah. It's hard to get education and some forms of education and housing. And I think this is a good segue going to the expander stuff. But
so the question,
the story just, I think I'm gonna defer to Joe because Joe hit it right on the nose, right? But it's other programs that the People's Coalition also is looking to research so we can present it to City Council or Charlottesville, the police department. What I understand too, and I'm just going to say it, it's easier to work with Charlottesville than Albemarle because Albemarle sometimes don't think they have a problem. And so, and I'm not talking about Jim. Jim totally understands it. Yeah. Right. But some folks in government in Albemarle don't believe they got a housing problem. Don't believe they have a police problem. They don't believe these things are happening because they are like in the wind looking at other things. Yeah. So I like working with Charlottesville because Charlottesville is always the model of places. Yeah. Good example. One of the things that the People's Coalition first started to fight for when in the beginning of the People's Coalition was the oversight board. Right. And now with the community push and everything, Charlottesville has the most strongest oversight board in Virginia. Right. Okay. And so that's why I say Charlottesville is a model. Yeah. Right. And Jim had her on. And Jim and Joe is actually making that model get even better and moving things along.
And an oversight board for the listeners is a PCOB, a Police Civilian Oversight Board. So citizens,
Officer Gonzalez is in charge of that now.
Yeah, right? Citizens that are involved in an organization that's involved in police oversight. Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, then we're gonna make sure that we close with all the details the folks need to know about the clinic and the work around that. Does that sound good? All right. Yeah. Thank y'all. So I am HO family. Stay tuned. We're gonna be right back with Joe and Harold to give us all the details of the upcoming expungement clinic happening this Thursday morning in Seville. All right, be right back. Tell a friend.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMH. IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams. IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Show Sir Charles, Miss Max, still here, still in the booth in the building with none other than Legal Aid Justice Center and the Expungement Council in the clinic that they have coming up this Thursday morning. Want to make sure everybody knows the details around that event. So it's been a minute since y'all were with us last time, but we were talking about the last clinic you had. So tell us sort of what to expect with this one. Like, what were the accomplishments of the last one, sort of leading into this one?
The accomplishments we helped, I think maybe 14 people, 15 people. That's a small number, but it's a big number for us because it gave those people some league room to like get employment and get housing if they might need it. I'm looking to double that number this go around. I want to shout out Joe and Jim for being able to, because without them, this couldn't happen really. And so I want to thank y'all so much for that, because it gives people opportunity to have upper mobility, because then it is nothing a barrier that's going to stop them in terms of their criminal justice. Their criminal record.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we are talking about Thursday, November 9th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at City Space, the Expungement Clinic, Charlottesville, brought to you by the Expungement Council and Legal Aid Justice Center. When you guys state criminal records can prevent you from obtaining housing, employment, and educational opportunities. Come to the clinic to get eligible charges off your record to ease these obstacles. I don't think that can be repeated enough, but Joe, definitely want you to chime in on what you would want folks to know leading into the clinic.
Yeah, well, it's sort of sad to me that prosecutors have to be thanked for doing what's fair and just. And, that's one of the problems. And going back to elections and why we need delegates and senators in Virginia to help to continue to improve the law in this area. And there's some changes coming in 2025. They're very technical and complicated. And so the biggest takeaway that I think Harold and I want to have people understand and the listeners understand and spread the word on is certain convictions are going to be eligible for expungement starting in 2025. Right now, you can't expunge anything that resulted in a conviction, but that's going to change in 2025. It's not as far as we need to go on expungement law, but it's an improvement and it's a step in the right direction. But I think the biggest thing that Harold and a bunch of other folks are doing is just increasing awareness. I think there's a pop-up reentry clinic Thursday, and Whitmore Merrick's going to be running people from there to City Space. I think he's got a vehicle lined up. Whitmore's a community leader and community activist. And so just starting to spread the word that there's good stuff going on, and we want people to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it definitely shouts out to Whitmore. His transportation service that he has, Whitmore Merrick, and also you all already mentioned the great work that the folks like your Huru and so many others in the community that's doing to help this work. So wanted to make sure that you all also give folks the details when it comes to the registration and the filing fee coverage. What details do they need to know around those two things?
I'm going to say this first before you think you are eligible. The only thing I think Joe mentioned that you can get expunged, and this is a history about expungement. The last time the law was created was 1974, and they haven't touched it since then. So the only way you can get something really sealed on your record is to have a non-process and a dismissal. So if you have a non-process and a dismissal, you are eligible to get that sealed or expunged, one of the two. That's a wordplay too that folks have.
It goes away and it's not on your record anymore, and it's not showing up anywhere.
So that's so if you call me and say, Harold, I got a conviction for blah blah blah, I'm gonna tell you can't come. You might want to think about in 25, and so that way you don't have to worry about coming down there and getting kind of your feeling hurts. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, people get excited if they can get their records. I be on the phone with people, and as soon as I say, hey, was it a dismissal or a non-process? They be like, no. And that whole, there's tons of bricks hit them like, oh my goodness, right?
But even if that's the case, like, could they still come in and get educated on?
Yeah, so we definitely, the Expungement Council does like presentations about what is in the law for 25 and what's like the possibilities for now until 25. But I think Joe's right. We want to expand it a little bit more where it's not so much technical things, because there's certain things in 25 that you can't get charged for this or that for the 7 years. And we really want to say, like, if your record been, if you haven't been in trouble for so long, just get that off your record unless it's some like heinous crime, like something against a child or something, But I think it is.
But we're there to answer questions for anyone that wants to come to City Space 10 to 3 Thursday.
Okay, that's important.
We're there to answer any questions anyone has, and there's no cost to anyone.
None.
Okay, yeah. Because I saw on the flyer, anything you all wanted to mention on how to register, whether you pre-register or like what's necessary for that.
I don't know if it's registration on that.
Oh yeah, the flyer. Yeah, so the flyer says that you can pre-register by going to Expungement Clinic Seville. And it looks like there's a link through the Legal Aid Justice site as well. But it says if you do not register, though, like you're able still to attend.
So if you don't register this, like I said, we can talk to you about what is possible. So for instance, we had more walk-ins than we had folks register last time.
Mm-hmm.
And those walk-ins had some other charges. But what I realized is you don't see one person with one charge that needs to be sealed or expunged.
Mm-hmm.
People have many charges, and one of those charges that probably needs to be expunged is one of those important charges, like a failure to appeal, right? So since you got a failure to appeal and it got dismissed, it's not going to be dismissed on your record. It's still going to be there in case. And then the reason why I say that, because most time we get in trouble again. And if that's on your file, they're not going to let you out because they're going to say you had a failure to appeal. So we're trying to help people in many ways as we can. So that's a good example. Yes.
A couple of things. So do you have to, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the flyer, but do you have to have a photo ID to get the process rolling on the getting things expunged?
I don't believe you do, no.
All right. And then what is the kind of time frame to have your charges expunged or sealed?
So one of the reasons behind the expungement clinic that we're running is it's sort of like one-stop shop, do everything. So the University of Virginia Police Department's providing fee fingerprinting. There's attorneys there to help prepare petitions. There's law students that can go run back and forth between the courts. The judges, the local judges have been wonderful and agreeing to sign orders that are presented to them. So I think we're hopeful the turnaround's a week or two if everything's lined up. But the most important thing is, even if we don't do everything in a week or two, come by, educate yourself, learn your options, get questions answered, get linked up with all the different resources we have, because we do expungements year round, and we can help you year round if it's a Charlottesville or Albemarle charge. And if it's somewhere else, we can sort of give you guidance on that. So if we don't get you the ideal situation Thursday, we can at least get the process started.
Okay. And then last question, this kind of expanded expungement program that is going to be in place in 2025, is that a done deal, or could that be revoked, repealed?
So they got it's in so they looked at the law that was passed, and they sent it to I forgot what they said. They sent it to another legislative branch to look at. I forgot what the legislative branch is, but we want to push for more. So yes, there is something that's going to be coming out to clean up some of the mess that this is. But what I want to say, just how crazy we talk about defund and fund, just how crazy things is. They couldn't get this law quicker because the state is working with MS-DOS, not the system MS-DOS. And so they couldn't get the system up fast enough because they had to go get money from the state to even change their way of. And when I say MS-DOS is an old program that was what in the 90s, right?
And I didn't even know that, but I'll still vouch for it because people will be surprised on the state of Virginia and how behind database systems are. You would be surprised.
And so we actually is helping them catch up. And what we're trying to do is, like, how I say it, like Joe said, elections mean something, right? And so we know we probably won't get anything for another 2 years, but we're going to be pushing for legislation, right? I got another analogy. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And when these type of things, you have to have the longevity, because you're not going to get something just tomorrow.
Thank y'all for that. So Joe and Harold, as always, thank y'all for being such a great resource and community servant, working for the people. So November 9th, Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at City Space. Folks can get even further detail. And if they need to follow up with you all on any level, how can they reach you?
They can call me on my phone, on my cell phone. My number is 434-409-0791. And I don't mind giving it out because at one time was helping people get their rights back. And so my number been out through the state. That's another thing that you should have a conversation about too, is how the state took all those people rights back from them, or didn't give them rights back to vote, to bear arms. And that just happened under the new administration.
And I'll respond to anyone. It's platania@charlottesville.gov, and my direct dial 434-970-3179. That's 24/7. Just leave a voicemail and a callback number, and I will make sure to get back with you.
Sounds good. You want to take us to break, Ms. Max?
I just want to thank our guests for being here with us today, and I hope that as many people as possible will show up. If you can take advantage of this expungement clinic, please show up. Make the effort. If you can provide transportation for someone to be a part of this clinic and get some charges that may be hindering them in life removed from their records, then please do that. Help them. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding to learn.
Come be on the show. It has been quite a while now, and a lot of water under the bridge. And I've really enjoyed working with you over the years in relation to the school system. So it's really my pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for taking time.
We were saying during the
schedule.
break that we believe Dr. Haas, Doctor, right? I'm sorry.
Matthew.
Okay. Was one of our first guests. Well, when the show
early
started.
on. I don't know if it was first, but it was early. Yeah. It was a long time ago.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Let's make sure we got all our bearings together here, Max. So we got everything running so that people can hear us online and on air. So tell a friend, tell a friend. So Dr. Haas, like I think, Matthew, I think where we there's so many different angles that we can start, but Max, I want to make sure that we remind folks to get out and vote. Right. This you can never overlook any election. They all make a difference in some way, shape, or form. And one of the things on the ballot for people under our listening area right about now is the Albemarle County Public School Board. And so that is of the uttermost importance. So Matt, let's actually start right there. When it comes to whenever you look at school board candidates in an election coming up, like how do you approach that? And when it comes to maybe communicating with your staff and communicating with the community on how important a school board election is to to the state of the public schools.
Absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. There is a delineation between the board and the superintendent where much of what goes on in terms of communications around candidates for the board comes through the school board and the school board office. However, as you can imagine, I do play a role, and part of what I do is try to be as open, transparent, and informative with the candidates as they seek the office. I really respect anyone in our community that will really put themselves on the line for what they believe in. It takes a lot of courage to do that, especially when it comes to facing a public ballot. And so one of the things that I do, for example, is when a candidate is known to me, I do reach out to them. I offer to meet with the candidate and we go through our operating budget for the current year, the strategic plan, as well as our capital plan, which is our long range advisory committee plan. And I feel like spending an hour with the candidate, building a relationship and giving them essential information and then where to go find it and opening up the door to communication is really an important thing to do so that they are as prepared as they can be to participate in public discourse and really have the facts about the school system rather than what they might just hear on the news or see on social media. So that's one of the things that I do.
And so, like any good job interview, I realize that meeting with the candidates isn't a job interview. I'm sure there's a conversation of what does this school system need? What does this school board need? Tell us what, in your opinion, your school system needs.
Well, what Albemarle County Public Schools needs is, I would say, not unique in some respects, and then particularly unique in others. I would say we're not unique in the respect that our school system needs board members who are 100% devoted to public education, and that they are supportive of our families, our employees, particularly our teachers, who are the key to educating our students. So I feel that that's the first qualification for a school board member. And opinions about how to go about supporting public education are going to differ. But if we always start with that as a big overlapping principle, then how we get there becomes debatable. And often that debate, I think, is one of the most healthy parts of a public board. Albemarle County is unique in the respect that we have long time intransigent achievement gaps between our students of color and our white students, and then also between our students with disabilities and all students, and students who are economically disadvantaged and all students. Really, across any of the individual demographic groups, we have achievement gaps, and we also perform below the state average when it comes to the one high stakes test, which is the standards of learning test. So a board member coming into that environment, I feel, has to have a laser focus on the achievement gap, providing resources and accountability, and also transparency so that the public knows, particularly our families and and the local taxpayers, as to how we're doing and what we're doing to try to improve the things we can improve within the school system to make those things better. So the other thing I would say where it's not unique is that a candidate coming onto the school board, they are an elected official, however, they are part of a board.
Right.
And so it is critical that someone joining the school board understand that while they're an individual leader and they represent a magisterial district, they cannot accomplish anything on the board unless they are part of the overall team of the board.
And how many board members?
There are 7.
And all 7 members are at-large members?
No, there are 6 magisterial members,
Sorry.
and then there's an at-large member. So with the Board of Supervisors, there are 6 magisterial members, and it's sometime in relatively recent history, the Albemarle County Schools took on an at-large member, which I think was a good idea, because then you don't have a split vote, right? So it's either going to go 4-3. It's going to go 4-3 if there's a split. But having said that, it's really important for all the board members to understand that whatever they accomplish in terms of policy and direction for the school system, they accomplish as one board. That doesn't mean that they just all agree with each other all the time. And as I said earlier, by having differences of opinion, you can reach a better decision oftentimes, but they still have to do it as a board together. So a person joining the board needs to understand that it's a collaborative board. And I think our school board is a collaborative board. I am really very happy to work for the Albemarle County School Board. Those qualifications that I talked about earlier, I feel they meet all of them. And they are, I know whatever candidates succeed in joining the board this fall, and then in January, they'll be embraced as part of a board.
Okay.
So
real quick. And how many vacancies does the board have? Upcoming vacancies?
So you have the at-large, which is currently occupied by John Alcaro. He's been on the board for quite some time. And so he essentially vacated his seat. So he's not running. Then you have the Whitehall district, which is Rebecca Berlin. And she was appointed by the board when Dave Oberg retired from the board. So she's running now as a candidate for that. And then you also have the Ravenna, which is our school board chair, Judy Lee. And so she's running. And also Scottsville district, which is Ellen Osborne. She's running. Those 2 board members are not opposed by another candidate, but I think one has someone out there who's said they're going to be a write-in candidate.
Okay.
And then recently, Katrina Carlson left the board, so the board's in the process right now. They did interviews a couple weeks ago, and so they're in the process now of trying to figure out how to appoint someone to the board, and then actually this time next year they can do a special election to elect a person to the board to fill her term.
Okay. It's a lot of vacancies.
So there's a lot right now.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
And that's why we have you here, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Matt Haas of Albemarle County Public Schools. He is the superintendent. Let me ask this question. Something that really confuses me, y'all, is like why certain officials align with political parties. And so I'm asking you that question, Matthew, in regards to education, to public schools, because to me, my hope would be, or it should be, like for instance, I'll contrast it with like police, for instance. Like, I don't know why when somebody runs for sheriff or whatnot, they align with the political party. I'm like, it's supposed to be law enforcement, protecting and serving everybody, right? So I want to ask you, Dr. Haas, on maybe why you think, or what role, or does it really, or is it just for the funding part of why a candidate would need to align with the political party when it comes to doing what's best for public education?
So just remembering that the title of this show is In My Humble Opinion.
Absolutely.
Because and also you may not be satisfied with my answers because I have a fine line to walk. I am not a partisan person. When I am a moderate, I try to find as far as my public life, it's very important to me to be sure that all people can see in me some representation. So I'll say that as a disclaimer. My feeling is that, and it is a fact that school boards in Virginia are nonpartisan. They are not
By definition.
By definition, they're
Right.
not to designate. Even the state school board, the Virginia Department of Education school board is supposed to be a nonpartisan school board. However, at the state level, the governor appoints members of that board, so that can shake out for partisanship. My opinion is that until recently, we have not had candidates identifying themselves, or perhaps community members identifying candidates as members of a particular political party. And I think there's a couple things that impact that. One is, yes, I agree with you, Charles, that there's infrastructure. When you have infrastructure behind you as a candidate and support, and then I think you have a better chance of doing fundraising, things like that, because it's not a free business. People need funding, unfortunately, to run for these seats. The other thing I think is a relatively new phenomenon that's developed through state government, the federal government. There's increased polarization around public positions, so elected public positions. And so I think there is some, I would almost refer to it as like safety in numbers or safety in a coalition. If you can be part of a group or affiliated with a particular political organization, then you're gonna have some cover, and you're also gonna have a lot of support. And it makes it so that there's a ready constituency that once they are signaled that you're part of their their constituency, that they're going to identify with you, and you could often just almost automatically have their
Makes
votes
sense.
because of the polarization.
Right. Makes sense. Of course, ideologically I disagree, but it makes sense. I get it. But hey, but the questions are already rolling in for you, by the way.
Great.
Like so you're a popular guest. Just want you to know.
I'm not surprised. You probably have a big listening audience.
Well, thank you. So yeah, so as far as the direction we can take, let's go ahead and get to some of the questions. Well, actually, no, Max. I think we still got to set up some more of the framework for the conversation. I think we would be remiss if we don't first approach. I kind of go back, because anybody that watches the local news knows that Albemarle County Public Schools have come under fire. Your job has come under fire publicly. Things like that.
So now you have a microphone.
Now you
Tell
have a
everybody
microphone.
how you really feel.
Right.
I'm just playing. Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
No, you're good. But in all fairness, and to even give benefit of the doubt, like knowing that none of us are perfect. Fact is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but majority, I can't even say majority, but I would say a lot of, if not most of, public school systems have been hit hard and have seen like unfathomable changes and unexpected changes post-COVID. And so I would say personally, some of the heat that a lot of our teachers have taken, a lot of principals have taken, a lot of, like school administrators have taken, has been unwarranted to a certain extent, because it's something that we're seeing nationwide, like when it comes to fall offs in attendance, performance, things like that. Now, that's not an excuse that we don't have a job to do, right? But I think that needs to be kept in perspective. So like Max said, actually, want to give you an opportunity out of things that have been made public as far as the criticism of recent performance of Albemarle County schools, what the state of that is from your perspective and some of your goals as far as fixing these things.
Sure. So I'd say the biggest, the most important group that are impacted by all the things you talked about are our students. As an employee, and and as a workforce and as a community, we're all adults, and we have had our school years, and I worry mostly about children and their sense of belonging to a school system that is stable. And when they go to school, they feel like it's a stable place, and they feel like they want to go there, and their needs are going to be met. Their academic, their physical, and their social emotional needs. So the thing I would say, and my top priority always is that understanding that at the community level, there will always be some sense of a commotion, or there will be some different kinds of controversies that come about. The priority is to keep the students at the school level feeling like this is settled for me every day at school. And when I get to school, I've got a teacher that is meeting my needs, and I get to be part of something good. So that's really what I try to focus on. For me personally, in this job, I expect to be criticized all the time. And that's because it's part of my job to receive feedback and listen to feedback from all of our stakeholders, our students, our parents, our families, our employees, taxpayers. I expect to be criticized, and I have not had a day where I'm not criticized in some way, either on a one-to-one level or in a community level. And when I meet with people, it is my habit to ask the person, depending on whether it's appropriate, to please give me feedback on my job performance. How am I doing right now? Particularly with the people that report directly to me, because we have to set an environment where feedback is expected and it's a gift. And so even if feedback feels embarrassing, or it feels like a criticism, or it's public, I still see it as something that I need to reflect on and find something in it that I can keep being better at my job. Because, how well I do my job does influence and does impact how things happen in the school system. I accept the fact that that's what takes place. Now, our school system, as you know, for pretty much any recorded time, has had achievement gaps with our students. And what I wanted to do when I became superintendent is to shine a light on those achievement gaps.
And I'm sorry, when did you become superintendent?
In 2018.
Okay.
Was to shine a light on those gaps and expose and make sure that we bring the good, the bad, and the ugly data straight to the school board in public venues and in reports, so that the board would see the actual real facts about the school system. The fact is, we are a successful school system. Overall, we perform very well. I would say that families are happy with our schools, and they're happy with the support they receive. However, we have these intransigent achievement gaps, and particularly in reading and in math, and also opportunity gaps. And so you can't address something unless you shine a light on it and give the facts about it. And then when you do that, you do run the risk of being mostly associated with it. But that, if you're afraid of taking that risk, then the problem's never going to get solved. So from my perspective, I'm not trying to go on someplace else. I'm not interested in padding my resume or having everything sound like it's great all the time here. I'm committed to doing the work here. And so I'm fine with if someone wants to blame me or blame the decisions I've made for how things are. However, the decisions we've been making are the right decisions to move forward and change things. Having an outside consultant come in to review all of our data, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to create a report that gives us the root causes, which aren't pretty, and also the recommendations for how we should deal with them, and making it public, which is rare for school systems to make such a report public. Those are risky propositions for a person in my position, because again, the expression of shooting the messenger came from somewhere. So fortunately for all of us, our board had a desire to do this work, and they understand that just because we are looking at data where we've not been successful, it's not about blaming, it's about trying to figure out how to get better. And so the steps we're taking, working on our curriculum, the steps we're taking on accountability for schools, And all the work that's going on right now is going to set us up for success and set these students up for greater success with those outcomes.
That sounds good. It sounds good, but it's a lot of work.
Yes.
So yeah,
there's something. This is not anything you have to respond to, but in listening to your what you just said, there's something to be said if all of the backlash that you and or the board or whomever else is receiving within your school system is stemmed from an attempt to make sure that all students within your school system have an equitable chance of success. It's bad. That's pretty bad. I mean, I realize, I don't want you to say anything that.
I think that it's always hard to try to attribute a particular cause to something that happens. And however, I think one of the things that I would say in response to that is what we should all understand is that when we work with children that need extra time and support, and we figure out how to work with them and provide what they and their family needs for them to be successful academically, it doesn't take anything away from anyone else. In fact, the research shows that school systems that focus on equity and focus on providing students what they need to be successful are more successful with all students. And the notion of the rising tide lifts all the boats is what we're talking about here. And having said that, there is a narrative that, and I've even heard it said, from top political leaders in Virginia, that equity is a confusing word. It causes anger. It causes whatever. It's a simple word. The word equity means that we have high standards for all of our children. We expect all of them to do well, and we are willing, as Charles said, to do the work to provide each child what they need to be successful. And so it's not confusing. It's only controversial if you're worried that it's a takeaway. And equity is not a takeaway.
I mean, I'll say it for you. It's a political talking point because I know you want to stay nonpartisan, but people are using that as a political tool right now. But I'm curious because in your values, it actually says equity. Has there been pressure from the state to remove that from your values?
Well, let me put it this way. In the prior administration, there was an Office of Equity that had really just kind of kicked off maybe 2018-ish. And in fact, you remember Dr. Hairston, his department at that time, when the State Department kicked that off, our school system won the first award for equity in school systems in Virginia in terms of the program that we were doing around culturally responsive teaching. And some of the other, the anti-racism policy that we adopted. And when the new governor came in, and we're on our second state superintendent since the governor came in. The first state superintendent deleted all of that from the state webpage. Anything referencing equity was completely removed from it. So I can't think that that's a coincidence.
Right. So Max, I think we got to jump into these questions. The audience has been chiming in. So we have what look like we have about 3 of them so far, Max. We try to get through these. So first one that came in is, what if any support system has been put in place specifically for Black students and African American students to address the achievement gap?
So the support systems, as we talked about earlier, around providing students what they need to be successful. Some of it is around accountability. And so when we work with our schools and work with our school principals, we do not look at overall results for students. We work with them around specific enrollment groups, including Black students, and we set targets. We set goals for improving their results in terms of reading and math. So that support without accountability is, it's basically just providing things without a measure at the end to see if they're working. The support networks, I would say, at the school level are, for example, this year going into the budget, we introduced a reading specialist at every school above and beyond the new Virginia standards for reading specialists. So when a child comes in and if they're not meeting their benchmarks in terms of phonemic awareness, even at kindergarten or first grade, then they have access to a reading specialist. At the high school level, a lot of it is built around opportunities. And so what we do now in accord with our anti-racism policy, just to kind of give you the other end of the spectrum from elementary school to high school, is every year for 10th graders, we offer the PSAT, which is the precursor to the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And what we now have as a standard operating procedure is that counselors review PSAT results looking for students who are not typically represented in our advanced academic classes at the high school level. And there's actually a range of scores where it's telling you that the child, the young adult could be successful in an AP class or another type of college class. And we have a standard operating procedure for our counselors that demands that they reach out to that child and the family, counsel them on joining that class so that they can have a more rigorous experience. So those are just a couple of the things that we do to try not just to provide the support, but also have accountability and higher expectations for our students of color.
Yeah. So let me, but I have to ask: are there more instances that are more specific to the Black and African American student population? Because what I heard you say was great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like that could, like, those approaches are more umbrella, like that would serve everybody. But specifically when you look at like the DEI work that's happening, like the good folks like Dr. and Ayan and folks like that are doing, when they come to you with very specific Black and African American issues of that student population, are there specifics that kind of separate those where we say, well, wow, we need to deal with this issue because it is impartially affecting this student population?
And I think the example that you gave around culturally responsive teaching is probably the most important thing that we're doing and that can be done with our educators to increase their cultural awareness. And the reason I say that is because it's about each teacher understanding their biases, understanding what their blind spots are, and being able to close the opportunity gap, the opportunity for a relationship between the teacher and the child. That gap, whether the extent to which that gap closes or grows, particularly for a child in kindergarten or first grade, will set the tone and set the stage for that child's trajectory moving forward. Our board, as part of our anti-racism policy, has said that by the year 2026, all Albemarle County schools teachers will be credentialed in culturally responsive teaching. And we have maintained our culturally responsive teaching professional learning program in spite of the fact that, as we mentioned earlier, there's been a kind of change of climate in Virginia around that. So I think within the Office of Community Engagement, we have several directors. We have a director of equity. We have a director of community engagement, and the support that they provide is of particular importance because it's support around closing the gap between families and the school. And one of the keys to a child being successful at school is whether their parents feel like they can advocate, that they know what's going on, that they know how well their child's doing.
That's the truth.
And we going into this school year, Dr. Kaiser and her department established a requirement, and of course I supported it, that every school host 4 academic family nights this school year. And so what that means is bringing families in, helping them learn about the science behind reading instruction, math instruction, and helping them be part of their child's education in the school. But it doesn't go far enough just to open the door and say, come in if you want. They target families that they haven't seen, or that they're worried that their families are marginalized in some way. They're reaching out directly to them and having them come in for those nights. And in talking with Dr. Kaiser about it, she feels like they have been very successful so far this year.
Gotcha. And those things feed into 2 questions that we have. So appreciate you already alluding to those. I think the first one we can go to is this question and comment that says, nationally and locally, there have been in-depth conversations and concerns about the lack of Black and brown teachers of color. As the demographics of our area shifts, and which some we didn't even touch on, but we've touched on in other shows about how you do have a higher immigrant and Black and brown population in general that's coming to the county, and some are coming from the city into the county. So I'm sure that's something you're facing. So this question is, as the demographics of our area shifts to include more people of color, can you talk to us how you are leading the charge for recruitment and retention of teachers of color, as it pertains to your mission of equity, in terms of retention? And I can revisit this if you forget a part of the question, but to address the recruitment and retention, but also in terms of retention, has any focus been placed on supporting the teachers of color who are maybe the only ones in their building? Also, in the school where the teaching staff has no teachers of color, which strides are being made to help students see the value in diversity?
Yes.
So that was kind of loaded.
No, that's great. And I think that all aligns with the work we're doing in our human resources department and our strategic planning. So I know I give these like $5 answers. So if I'm going on too long, you can cut me off.
Okay.
But it is true that Albemarle County has a shifting demographic, particularly in the urban ring and the southern and northern parts of the urban ring. Over time, when you look at our data, we have gone from when I first joined the school system 20 years ago, about 70% of our students were white students. And now it is 57%.
Wow.
So there's been a big shift. And that is one of the reasons why I think we have not been particularly successful around closing achievement gaps, is because as our student population has changed, the old methods, or the methods that kind of worked with students that came with a lot of the same background as the teacher, are not as effective. And so our teachers need to constantly strive to become culturally relevant and culturally responsive in the work that they're doing. And I feel like they are. I feel like there's a lot less pushing going on, and a lot more teachers raising their hands and saying, I want to do that work. And what can you give me what I need so I can do it? Now, we recently have had a minor, but in some ways significant bump in the percentage of our teachers of color in Albemarle County schools. When I started in the county, there were 10% of the teacher workforce in Albemarle County schools when I was principal at Albemarle was teachers of color. That moved to 11%, and then it just kind of sat there, and it's just sat there forever. 3 years ago, it'll be going into the third year, we started our own human resources department for our Albemarle County schools. And what that allowed us to do was begin to focus on these areas of concern, and do it, really prioritize diversifying our teacher workforce. So recently, as a part of some of the changes that we've been making, we went from 11% teachers of color to 13% teachers of color. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot, but it is a move in the positive direction. And if we had started making these moves 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we'd be sitting on, a much better situation right now. A couple things I think have impacted that. One is people really beginning to understand the power and the excellence of teachers of color. That when you have a teacher of color in the classroom, the research shows that not only do the students of color prefer that teacher and have that teacher as someone they really prefer to work with and feel engaged with, but all students feel that way, regardless of their demographic background. The other piece is that with the national and state and local teacher shortage, there are now differentiated pathways for people who have started their career in education but weren't necessarily credentialed the same way as a teacher normally would go into it. So there's multiple pathways now for certification, and what that's done is allowed us as a school system to identify strong teaching assistants, other paraprofessionals who have some education background, or maybe they have a 4-year degree in a different field, but they want to be a teacher and they're passionate about it. So we've been able to recruit them and provide them opportunities to get credentialed, the support they need financially. And so we have a large percentage of our teachers this fall that are provisionally licensed and they're teachers of color. Now, the other piece is about retention. And that's a whole nother difficult task, because when you have a large majority of your teaching force, particularly in a school that is white teachers or not diverse, it can be difficult to retain teachers of color. So what our Office of Community Engagement has been doing is working with the whole group of teachers of color and having gatherings with that community, so that even if I'm working in a school and I do not see another teacher that looks like me, I know that on a relatively frequent basis, I'm going to be able to get together with other teachers that can identify with the issues I'm facing. We can problem solve, and we can just understand just how important I am, as a teacher of color to the school and to the school system.
Absolutely.
And if there are Albemarle County Schools teachers of color listening today, I just want to express my appreciation. You make a positive difference along with your colleagues in the schools. And that's the thing we've got to work on, Charles, because no matter how much we hire, if people are going out of the bottom of the bucket, it's not going to change anything.
Key point. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And I think that that also feeds into something that I think encapsulates sort of the overall conversation, because a lot of times, just like with any entity of an ecosystem, I would say, right? A lot of times we look at the schools, or we look at the teachers or the principal or the superintendent to do things that really requires a handshake between the schools and the community or the family, and so like we all play a part in the student's success, like how well prepared the student is and how well taken care of they are before they enter the school building plays a role in how they perform at school, So I think that feeds into this, to the last question that we were sent so far, which is ACPS's mission statement includes the statement, "We seek to build relationships with families and communities to ensure that every student succeeds." Can you talk about the strategic steps that are being taken to rebuild relationships and establish sustainable partnerships with families and communities whose children have historically and continue feel disconnected or unwelcome at their local school? Can you talk to us about any community or family networking partnerships being created or currently in place? Where can families go to find out information about where they can access these relationships to build resources?
Yeah, that's great. I love that question, because really, for a lot of reasons, we cannot be successful with students without partnerships in the community. And I do think one of the positive side effects, I guess you might call it, or collateral, but really it's one of the main things to the criticism of public schools, is that a lot of everyday people are coming out and saying, wait a minute, we may be hearing this at the national level, or we may be hearing a lot of rhetoric, but we love our schools and we want to be part of the solution. So our job is not to isolate ourselves and say that we have all the answers to solving problems. Rather, our job is to reach out to partners, and our number one partner is the family. We need to partner up with families. They need to be, families need to feel that they are welcome and that they are an appreciated and valued part of their child's education process. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I would say is if you want to reach out and find out more about how you can connect with the schools and be part of that, I suggest reaching out to Eric Irizarry. Mm-hmm. He is our director of community engagement. Also, Dr. Jesse Turner. I think I said Dr. Eric Irizarry, but I'll say Dr. Jesse Turner. Mm-hmm. He is the director for family engagement. Okay. And so these staff members can be a first point of contact. Eric has been doing wonderful work in engaging, particularly our Latino community. There was recently a Latinx health fair at Albemarle High School that drew in hundreds of participants from around that community. And he did that in cooperation with Dr. Luna. And we have the other push that we've worked on is the academic family nights that are going on at the schools. Those are coordinated through the central office, and we provide support for that. So those are an intentional effort to create an environment that's parent friendly, where we don't all have all the answers, and that parents walk out with resources that are going to help them work with their children to be stronger readers. At the next level, we have partnerships with community organizations like the Chamber of Commerce. I know when we were struggling, and we continue to struggle to recruit and hire and retain bus drivers, we had outreach from the Chamber of Commerce on helping us to advertise bus driver positions in the school system. And so at that level, we also need partnerships with larger community organizations.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And like, so when it comes to these strategic relationships and partnerships, the family and community, are they like, do you feel that the value is felt there, like from the families? Now, I guess that's the last part of that question actually is, how do people get this info? Mm-hmm. If whether it's a teacher that may be the only person of color in their school, or whether the students are feeling like that they don't see other people of color, or they may be from a religion or a culture that's not that's not known, that's not widely known, or and they may not feel accepted. So, so when it comes to these resources, how do they, because you mentioned a lot of heavy hitters that you have on staff, but how readily accessible and available are these resources?
I think that's, if I had that's one of the areas. I was out at a listening tour event last Wednesday night out at Woodbrook, and that's really one of the areas I think is a weak spot for us, is our web page in terms of easy access for families to information they need to engage with the school system and sometimes their school, but also understandable information about their child's progress. So we've been getting a lot of feedback around that, and we have some work to do with our webpage, with information that we provide on it. So I think that question just echoes some of the criticism that we've had recently around accessibility to information that people can use. Mm-hmm. Now, I would say at the school level, because of the work that we do with principals and because of their unique ideas around embracing their school community, I think there's a lot more going on that we don't hear about at the division level. Mm-hmm. It doesn't perk up as a whole big community thing, but I'm never it never ceases to amaze me the efforts that the principals are going through to ensure that that they have all different demographic groups represented, and the families that are often marginalized are the first families they go to when they're seeking to build relationships in their schools. So I feel that, that's one of those things where you work, some people say, well, prioritize strategy. And when you change strategies, inevitably that will get to the culture. And then other people say, well, if you don't fix the culture, it will eat strategy for lunch every day. I think you have to work on both things. That you have to.
It's the human element,
right? Yeah, you got to work on the strategies, but I feel like we can have strategy all day long, but if a family comes to the school and walks away feeling that they were ignored or their needs weren't met, some of that can be the family, but the fact is that it's our job to be supportive of our students and families. So we got to get to yes with families much more often than maybe we do right now.
Yeah. So
I missed
like
a
I said,
lot of the
Max has
conversation.
something, but
Sorry,
I'll
but
have
I was
one.
just despite all the hard work that you and decisions that you and your school board make, a lot of this comes down to the boots on the ground and whether or not they buy into what you all are trying to implement here and have the best interests of the students at heart. And what's that like? Like, do you have the support that you need to accomplish the goals that you have within your school system or that the board has for the school system?
That's a great point, because just me sitting here right now, when we've got more than 1,400 teachers and about the same number of classified staff, so about 2,700 employees, ranging from the bus driver that's the first person to see the child when they get on the bus in the morning, to the classroom teacher. And so if the work that we're doing doesn't find its way to the classroom experience and is not embraced by at the classroom level, then it will fail. And if when the classroom door closes, it doesn't translate, then it will fail. And I used to get discouraged, I would say, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because I just didn't know, like, how do you do that, right? And how does it work? But what I realized over time is that particularly now, I'm very proud of our school system, and I'm always going to hold it up as, when I talk about our Albemarle County Public Schools employees, our teachers, our principals, our custodians, our everyone. Right. I really feel that they join our system understanding that we have a mission. We put that mission in front of them. It's at the bottom of everybody's email. It is probably the first time in my career where people openly talk about closing the achievement gap as our mission. Why are we here? We're here to close achievement gaps. We're here to help every child be successful. It's not pushing a wet noodle anymore to get people to see that as important. And I think it's because of what they come with when they know that they're joining a school system, that's our work. And if they didn't want to be part of that, then they wouldn't be on board. So if you're trying to get something to stick and the other side is sticky, then I think I'm optimistic that what we are working and striving to change, if we listen to our employees and acknowledge the challenges that they have and listen to what they say they need and provide it to the best we can, then they're already sticky and hungry to make changes for kids. And it's just a matter of getting things in alignment and getting it to them so they can do the work. So, I mean, I am optimistic that over the next several years that we have laid bare all the issues. Yeah. We have had an analysis of what the causes are and what we can do about it. We are taking steps to make a difference. These are all things that are very specific, that during the time that I've worked here for 20 years, that we have not had this kind of laser focus on these issues. Things will change. Things are going to change.
Well, if there's any consolation, we actually have someone who just wanted to say good afternoon, Dr. Hall. So there you go. You know, you got a friend that's just saying, yeah, we're here.
Well, good afternoon.
We're here. We're listening.
Thank you.
I was going to say one of the things that I can appreciate in what you just said was that you acknowledged the custodian and the bus driver. And
important.
oftentimes those individuals don't get mentioned at all, get mentioned last, and you especially don't hear them in the conversation of
achievement gap.
Right, the achievement gap. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I hear you guys have given them some raises, and that's great. Take good care of them. But no, I appreciate that you have the insight to be able to look at this holistically and all individuals involved versus just the one standing in front of the classroom. So.
Yeah, it takes everyone. And I'm going to say this just because, but one of the things as having been around for a while, I've had a lot of these roles. And in fact, for the whole first 2.5 months of the school year this year, I did drive a morning bus route
saw that.
For students who attended Burley. And, you know, the thing is, it just drove home for me how important that first person is. And, you know, when students are getting on the bus, there's an urgency. I felt an urgency to learn their names because when you greet a child by their name, when they first come on the bus every day, you see a difference in their face when they come by you, doing things like acknowledging, you know, they might, there was a student that had a t-shirt on for Virginia Commonwealth University. And I said, hey, that's a great school, you know, and my daughter goes there, and you make that connection. And everybody can do it. And I've seen custodians that will take time to do reading tutoring with students, establish relationships with them. And our principals, I'll tell you what, they've got a heck of a job, and the passion they bring to it and the personalization they make for our kids is just amazing. And yes, having said all that, our classroom teacher, our teaching assistant, our EDEP staff, they're the educators that are going to, I think, push the needle for each kid and help them be successful.
Thank you. So after all that said and done, so folks haven't beat you up too hard. You still here for the long haul. You still gonna get this work done?
Still in the fight.
We're going to get it done.
Okay.
Yes, Charles,
All
we
right.
will get it done, and keep the criticism coming. It is oxygen, and we won't get better, and I won't get better
That's right.
if I don't get feedback. So
Right. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Healthy criticism. And just lastly, I mean, I'll kick it to Max for final words, take us to break. But you know, after all those resources that you mentioned and the work being done, how do people reach out to express concerns or to get in touch with those resources in the county?
Okay, so to reach out, if you just send me an email, you can email the school board, and my email address is the superintendent's office. If you go to the webpage and you find the superintendent's office, you can just click on an email link right there. And it comes in through our communications office. So it's all hands on deck, and I don't care what the problem is you're having. It may seem like you think it's going to be minor for us, or we're not, you know, maybe it's too small. There's no issue too small or no idea that's not going to be good enough, or question that's we won't answer to try to keep moving things forward for you.
Thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Haas.
My pleasure.
Best of luck. Well wishes on, you know, your goals for your school. And as the superintendent of Albemarle County Schools, I want to thank you for seeing all of your students in your job duty. So
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate it.
Yep. All right. We'll be right back. Stay with us, in my humble opinion.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Yeah. You already know how we do. IMHO Talk Show in the booth in the building. Max Charles. I gave my governments that time. Maximilian Charles. Yes, indeed, family. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we're gonna try not to disappoint. Hopefully, you've been feeling the love so far this show. And yeah, because we are joined right now by the Bridge PAI Executive Director. Brother's been here with us, I guess, going on a couple years now. And none other than Jay Simple. Brother Jay, man, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty good. Thank you for having me over to talk with y'all.
Yes, indeed. Glad to finally have you on.
I know we've been talking about it for a minute, so it feels like today's the day.
Yes, indeed. Today is the day. It's come to fruition. Because I know a lot of people know about you, or they've seen the work around the city. And so like we're just so glad to have you. And you definitely want people who may not be familiar with your story. Including want to plug our partners over at Vinegar Hill Magazine, because I think when you first came to town, you had a cover issue. You know how hard it is to get a cover issue of Vinegar Hill Magazine, man, and you weren't even in town. so that speaks volumes for you right there. And now I know that they're running a series right now too about a project that you're doing, and you can let us know about that as well. But for those that may not be familiar with you or the Bridge for that matter, because you brought a new face to the Bridge PAI, you know what I mean? Like when it comes to particularly the urban community, Black and Brown community, and feeling represented, or like seeing ourselves within the Performing Arts Initiative, right? So let the folks know who Jay Simple is. What brought him to Charlottesville, man? Give us the rundown. Give us the background.
Yeah, no. So I've been in Charlottesville. We're going on 2 years right now, and I first came into town to work at the Bridge, but before I came here, I've been an artist pretty much all my life. Okay. I've always been into the arts, whatever it is. So I was, into photography, sculpture. I do performances. That's sort of my background, most solidly, is being an artist and trying to figure out what the arts does. How does it communicate something to each other, right? To the world around us, speak to these truths that sometimes we can't say in a certain way, but art can say it in a different way. So I always really love that.
And where are you from?
I'm from Philly.
Hey.
West Philadelphia. I was raised, but I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Good stuff, man.
So so I was working as an artist most of my life, and then around 2020, right after everything that was going on with George Floyd, and this explosion of people really calling on more recognition of Black lives, I started an organization called the Photographer's Green Book. Okay, and it was a resource for people in the visual arts to navigate their careers, and so that kind of really got me started thinking about how you can create an institution that's built to support some people who are very often neglected or underserved. And if you create an organization built to serve them, right, you invite in so many more people that you can help. So when I got the opportunity to come to Charlottesville.
Why don't people get that?
I don't know. It's really
Is it really that hard?
No, I don't think so. Right. But I think what it does though, it requires you to shift who gets to make decisions, what those decisions look like, and that can create conflict because of who has resources and power then, right? Somebody's got to switch out, and so that's scary for a lot of folks to do. And so we see that a lot happening right now in the arts and other things of a lot of desire for change, right, with that idea. But then once folks are actually in these institutions, we see there's a lot of pushback for what they try to bring.
Yeah.
Right. Now I heard you mention Philadelphia and Chicago. So out of that work that you mentioned, and maybe you want to mention some others, what work did you do in Philly and in Chi-Town? Because that's a big difference between those places and Charlottesville. So I'm curious, the work you did there, and then what inspired you to want to come to Charlottesville?
Yeah. Well, so I went to undergrad at Columbia College Chicago. I got my BFA in photography out there. And then, Philly's home, so everything I do, I feel like is kind of based out of Philly in one way or another. But I went to school out there. I have a master's in liberal arts from UPenn. And then I have a MFA, a master's in fine arts from the Rhode Island School. Dang, what's that place? RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. I swear I graduated from it. And so after that, I moved to Farmville, Virginia. Okay. And I was teaching out at Longwood for 3 years. Then moved back to Philly. and then I just came back here. So
Gotcha.
I was in Philly for about a year, but I had been out in Farmville for like 3. And I kind of, a lot of my work and like my own personal like photography and sort of conceptual work or whatnot is a lot about Virginia, because this is like the landing place of Black people. And like, it becomes a really interesting touch point throughout history for these like monumental moments around who we are, what we can be. And so I find that really fascinating. I see a lot of that happening right here in Charlottesville. So I'm like excited to be here. It's a big difference from Philly. But I think that
but Farmville was a good buffer.
No, right. It's like right in between. I was like Philly, Farmville, Charlottesville's right there.
Yes, indeed. So so the bridge PAI, you know, like I said, it seems to have been sort of refaced a little bit, because I can tell you the work that you've done so far, I applaud you, because, you know, the bridge name is showing up in places that honestly, you know, preceding you, I don't recall it showing up before. So I feel like now you've opened up the arts to a new demographic. So was that the main goal, or like what was the inspiration behind wanting to take this work on at the bridge?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like I came with maybe a different perspective, just in overall on like how to like run an organization that's in the arts, right? So I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to do, and I still got a lot of stuff I want to do, but I kind of came in and didn't really forefront that. So I was lucky enough when I got hired, we had done like all the strategic planning. They had gone out and interviewed, you know, community members, folks that were interested in the arts, our funders, everybody. And they were basically saying, you know, we really want more resources. We want our community to be more interconnected, and we want some free resources, studio space, equipment, all those things. And so I centered the entire thing that we would do off of that. So we started off as a small gallery. I think within 3 or 4 months when I came, we closed, and it was scary because I just got the job, and I was like, "Yeah, we're gonna close the thing that we've been here for 18 years, right?" But I think what was great about it was that at the core of that vision was to make something that wasn't here, right? That was accessible to new communities, and so I think that's just been really my goal ever since. So we opened up our new space, so on the downtown mall, right off of 3rd and Waters. It's basically a free resource center, right? Center for Creative Collaboration Underground. And you can come in there, you get free studio space, equipment, from 4K cameras, pencils, you got notebooks, like you got so much stuff there. We got like an incredible team there that works with us to like facilitate everything. And yeah, it's been a really good vibe.
Yeah. No, hold on now. So you kind of glossed over that. So you have to break that last part down when it comes to those resources and whatnot. Like, what does that look like? Is it like a rental system for those items, or you just use them when you're on site? What is?
So it's just you can use them when you're on site. So you like come in, and if you want to have a photo shoot, you can come. You can use all the backdrops and everything. We got like, you know, drills, saws, like a full kind of like wood shop situation going on, and then other just like really small specialty things like you know, we got a Cricut machine if you want to make like your own like clothing designs. We got like heat presses. We have a whole you know, fabric library. Got like 4 sewing machines back there. I mean, a lot of equipment that you can come in and just sort of like really get your feet wet, right? And the idea was, we hope that people come in and they don't stay, right? We want you to come. We want you to like build and incubate yourself. But we want to be a launching point for other people. And so that's why for us, collaboration, talking, meeting people is really important, because when we get artists in, we're always like, oh, I know this person who needs a graphic design, or oh, I know this person, right? And then we can start connecting our artists to different avenues so that they can grow, right, to wherever they want to go.
Do you have any programs for younger people, young kids?
Yeah. So we have a couple things. So we've been running some like summer programming. We're about to roll out in, the spring, a couple of free youth education, so 7th and up. One of them is going to be taught by Jay Johnson, and it's like a digital art class. And the other one by Sarad over at Vinegar Hill, and he's going to be teaching merchandising. And sort of marketing and clothing and stuff like that. So it's going to be exciting to be able to see that come out. But I think that's, you know, that's for us one of the key sort of aspects of a lot of things is to try to hit a younger demographic
Mhm.
to get exposed to the arts earlier, to be able to, right, one is just fun and
Yeah.
therapeutic, but
Yeah.
also like if you start creating these systems, right, you can basically like be teenager, you
Mhm.
can have a space, your
Mhm.
own studio space
Right.
for as long as like I was struggling
Mhm.
as an adult to be able to find one, right?
Mhm.
So what
That's
does that do, 4 or 5 years from now?
Yeah.
Hey,
See,
Max,
I have an
I
8-year-old
got
that
one for you.
loves to draw, and I was hoping that age number came down a little bit more. He loves to draw, and honestly, I'm not sure which spaces would be ideal for him.
Yep.
We're looking into that, so and it'd be great to get him around people that or diverse group of people.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, one thing that's cool is you can just come by anytime.
Mhm.
Like we're
Mhm.
always there,
Mhm.
and we like you come in like, yo, I need an activity, and there's
Right.
so much stuff that we can like show you. We
Okay.
have coloring books, we got all the stuff kind of little
Okay.
kids corner set up.
Okay.
But I think this is just for us like a starting point, right? And so we were like, okay, what age group would be the highest impact for us right now? And so we were thinking about that kind of like entering into the teenage
Mhm.
years,
Mhm.
right, and being able to give them something that they can come to on
Okay.
a like consistent basis.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Charles.
Yeah. Like on that point though, like how does that support come in for that? Because if I'm reading between the lines, I hear you kind of saying, this is a starting point. Like so there's a vision and there's goals for growth. Maybe share some of those goals, but also like what does the support model look like as far as like how do you get funded? Yeah. And also as far as folks who may want to volunteer, you know what I mean? Like, so that if you look at the overarching support model, what does that look like?
Well, I'd say there's a couple different ways that we're supported. One, I got a great team. So I work with my COO, Amber Smith, who's Charlottesville native, does a lot of like work in mentoring and education and just like keeps us organized and together. And along with her is my board, and our board is like filled with entrepreneurs that are like really helpful for us to be able to get support. So for example, I'm constantly talking about free supplies. You can come in and get free supplies, but we're able to do that because Sarah Sweet, who runs Scrappy Elephant, which is a reused art supply where she gets donated supplies. So she's able to help us be able to facilitate getting a lot of free supplies, right? And so it reduces our costs for a lot of things that we're doing. But then outside of that, it's we got donor members. So members can come and donate as low as like $5 a month. And that really helps us kind of do like monthly overhead. And then the rest of it, we have some really good funders. So one is the Janan Foundation. They've been really, really key in funding the opening of the underground. And then, CACF, state, local, all those type of things. We're kind of fundraising and granting that way. And there's a couple other private donors. Charlottesville's the mecca of nonprofit right below DC. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for support. And I think that we're kind of angling ourselves a little bit differently by answering a demand that was there. And so I think we're seeing a lot of people who want to come and help and support.
Max, I don't know if you realize this, but that board is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's majority women of color.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, was that purposeful?
Go
I gotta
us.
ask. That's right. That's right.
Go
Black
us.
girl magic.
Yeah. Right. What do they say? Behind every black man is a good, strong black woman. So
say it again for the people in the back.
Right. But it's really important. I think, again, like when we're talking about how do you build a different institution, right? I think that is something that's really important. I think it's noticed when you walk in the room. I notice it in the way that I have to operate and move and like how I'm held accountable for things, right? So I think it's really key for us to constantly look at institutions and organizations. Often they'll bring in someone who looks just like me, and the entire board will look something totally different. So for us, it was important that this kind of reflection is seen in all aspects of like decision making and agenda setting throughout the organization.
Yeah. And besides that, Max, I know you pretty well too. I know something that's on your mind.
Right.
Because when you talk about Jay, you've been here a couple of years. Does that mean that you came in when Charlottesville started experiencing a record number of of crime, like a record amount of crime, and particularly gun violence. And you've lived in some pretty major cities. So I got to imagine that there's a tie maybe to some things that you witness or experience coming up to how the arts plays a role in a young Black man's life and the importance of that. So can you touch on that? Or a woman, yeah. Like, so can you touch on, and and really like share with our listeners, because we have a lot of young Black families, young Black people, and our demographics are more than that. But in particular, when we look at what's plaguing our communities right now, how important things like the arts are. I know it's a philosophical question.
No, I mean, I'm an artist, so I want to be like, art solves it all.
Yeah.
Right? Or like art was the
Okay,
thing
so
that,
then how? Because that's the second time that I've heard that.
What?
That art solves it all when it comes to like social ills.
Oh yeah, no, I want to say that, right? Because it would feel good. Because I'm like, I dedicated my life to being an artist, so it's like, right. But the reality is that like it can. When I was in Rhode Island in 2017, I got a chance to meet Emory Douglas, and he was the person who did all of like the propaganda and drawing for the Black Panthers, right?
Ah, okay.
And so I was asking him like, what's the difference between art right now and art when you were doing art? Like, like what are we doing that you weren't doing, or what we're, what it is? And he was like, now you're making art with no movement behind it. We had a concrete movement, and that's what allowed my artwork to do something. He was like, I'm good at what I do, but it became so much more because it was built behind a message and a thing and everything like that. And so I think that's what the power of art can be. It can display a message, it can tell you something, but like it to be activated to the point of change, it needs actual actions behind it, right? Of people doing things in other avenues, right? That use that art as as a rallying point for how they feel or see or think about something. I think that in that way, it can communicate, it can inspire, and that's important, right? It's just like important to be able to see yourself in the media, the news, right? Drawings, paintings, right? You go to a gallery, if you see it's all white, you kind of begin to think that like somehow or another, you're culturally like not there, right? But if you see yourself there, it's important for like who you are, right? So in that sense, I think that art is important. But when I look at, and we're talking specifically about violence, right? If I look at that in the places that I've lived and here in Charlottesville, right? I think then you begin to see a lot of other things that are underlining that begin to happen with, a disproportionate amount of us being, resources being taken away, specifically like land, and how that operates in creating generational wealth, right? And all these other things that contribute to violence, where it's like violence itself is like a symptom of a lot of other issues that need to be solved. But like those other ones are deeply ingrained in our social fabric, not just Charlottesville, but
yes, I like that. You look like you want to say something, Max.
Well, I'm looking like, why you act like you're scared to give the answer?
Scared to give what?
Well, just hesitant to say what the truth is.
Oh no.
Okay.
No, I think
See?
No.
What?
No,
What is
this
it?
is just this is how
Okay.
this is just my mannerism.
Okay.
I also like to be very, very clear, right?
Okay.
Because again, I think I'm in a position within my field where I'm very often the first person to come someplace.
Okay.
And everyone's always waiting for me to be like full Huey Newton on them.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I feel that I got that energy. Right. But I'm also in a position that I'm serving a lot of other people that are outside of me. So I go Huey on my own time.
Okay.
Right. I'm here to talk about this message,
I got you.
this thing that
Makes
we're doing.
sense.
But I ain't going to water down what I'm saying.
Okay.
But I want to be sure that I'm representing what I'm saying in the way that I want to be.
Gotcha.
Great answer.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we are joined by Jay Simple, executive director. Is that the official title of the Bridge PAI? Something that you made me think as you were talking, as well as like when we think about music, right? Like that art form of particularly hip hop music, rap music. And how some people say, well, it's just art. It's like just like you. So when you look at sort of social ills and whatnot, then some people want to point to the music our kids listen to. You know what I mean? Like that's one generational thing that we hear every generation. But then you have the people who say, but it's art. Some people say art imitates life. Right. So there's this whole debate going. I don't know if you saw, but actually on Sway in the Morning, D1, the New Orleans Christian rapper, talking about like the new Meek Mill and Rick Ross album. And he was like, but Meek, like you talking about criminal justice reform and you know, do all this great stuff in the community, but then you talking about shooting your ops and all this stuff on the record. You know what I mean? So then it brought back to light this debate of like, do we tell movies that you no longer can have violence in movies? Or is that art somehow different when it's Black people telling the art? Because I even think about like someone like a Tyler Perry and how Spike Lee was like, that doesn't represent Black people right. And some people are like, dude, it's entertainment. It's, you know, it's the way he's portraying his art form. So again, I'm getting philosophical on you, but when you think about art and it reflecting life and the role that it plays, like what's your take on that, on drawing that contrast between art and life?
I don't know. I guess I think about it in two ways. I think one part of it for me when I look at it is what stories get to be told and popularized through art. So if you look at like music, I don't think, for me at least when I look at it, it's not that there's a problem with like, right, you're talking about Meek. And I mean, I'm from Philly, so I can't say anything. You know what I mean? I won't be able to go back home right now.
You got to check in.
Yeah, right. Got to check in, right? But like, right, they're talking about like, right, is it wrong that he's doing that or making that music? But you're right, it's part of his story, right? And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think there's also an industry which is more willing to accept that narrative of what Blackness looks like, and they profit off of that. Whereas the other narratives and stories are not propagated the same way. So there's this constant idea that we're, you know, somehow or another criminalized, which again trickles down to all these other things that society tries to put on people. And so I think that the story itself is not the issue, but what the vastness of, you know, our narrative gets to be told on that level of a platform. And so I think that then people come and they critique it because they're like, hey, listen, we know this is a thing, but like, we don't even got that many spots here. So can you tell a different story? Which is kind of weird because then we're like, yo, listen, I need you to tell a story that's not yours, right? And so it's like, and so I think people, you know, they try to do that. And you see that in the complexities of someone who's, right, rapping about violence and thinking about criminal justice reform. So I think, you know, both things can live, dualities live simultaneously in people. So I think that's a thing. But
yeah. That's a good answer. Yeah. But yeah, so we are joined by Jay Simple of The Bridge PAI. So the goals, man, you know, I guess, you know, kind of winding up the interview, but definitely feel free to chime in anything, you know, people who may be their first time being introduced to you or whatnot, anything that you want them to know, you know, about your work here in Charlottesville, please chime in. But I'm curious about going forward, maybe some of the events that you all already have going on or some of the things that you have planned that you want folks to know about.
Yeah, no, I think, right. I think one of the things that we did was we opened up a free art space. That was like,
that's major.
That's major. You can't really go to many places. Like there's ain't no place like this I know of in Philly. And I've never seen it my whole career. Otherwise, I would probably be somewhere else right now. I'd be making work in that studio, right? So I think that's keeping that space, right, and making it sustainable is one thing. But again, I think like looking at all these things, I think when you open a free space, you're like, cool, it's free. With that becomes a whole lot of other things. Free ain't necessarily free. And like, I can be an artist and want to come make work in the studio. And this is a long way to answer your question. You know, right? I might want to come in the studio, make my work all the time, but if I'm an adult, I probably got to work 40-hour a week. That gives me 2 days, right? Usually an entire week that I can make work. One of those, I'm going to nap. I don't know about y'all, but I'd be sleepy after work. So one of them sleeping, right? One of them is going to go try to like meal prep maybe a day or two. So I probably got like 6 or 7 hours that I can go like try and be creative. That's a really hard space to really kind of get into your creative practice, right? Just like anything, you have to be in there doing it consistently. So that's why very often those people who are artists are folks that have the capital and the wealth to be supported so that we can go into our studios and play around and stuff, right? So we're looking to begin building fellowships and internships that are paid. And we're really looking, so if you're out there funders, we're looking for folks who would be willing to fund interns and fellows that get paid a part-time salary. So that at least we could be like, hey, you can come, you can work here. We give you a studio, equipment, supplies, and a part-time salary to work on your creative endeavors in the space. And so I think that's us trying to like sort of start tackling other things that we're seeing. So I think we're looking at that, launching more education programs and, coupling those with food programs. Like what happens if you come in here, right? Artists talk about a lot of things, right? Like a lot of emotional things. Like, so what happens if you have like someone who can do some therapy sessions, right? In the space with our artists. So really thinking about the arts, but then all the things that are around it that our community could use to support themselves, right? And then hopefully go off and do some crazy stuff. And like, we get to look back and be like, yeah, that was cool. I remember when that was like just starting to bud up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good stuff. It's an awesome conversation.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I do have a question. I've been playing with whether or not a stupid question, but I'm just going to throw it out there for you. What, as an artist, where would you say the lines merge or kind of or blur when it comes to art being art, whether we're talking about art that's created by a white person or art that's created by a Black person?
Can I throw in a third?
Yep.
AI. Like an artificial art that we have nowadays. I would throw that third one in that question.
What makes the difference?
If there is one.
Yeah. Yeah, and the value, right? Or like who controls the value?
I mean, like, I think there's a is there a difference? No. Right. I mean, like, okay, like big umbrella, I'd be like, no, because like, right, black and white are like constructs, right? So they're just people making stuff. But there is a difference between like the things that you reference and you talk about. You know what I mean? It's like white artists ain't going to make work about like the texture of the curls of their hair. It'd be weird. You'd be like, oh, what is this? Like, right? You'd be like, this is a little strange, right? Like, so there's certain things that we talk about in our work. And like, I think what makes it Black art or white art is that we make work about our lives, about our context, right? And so me and you have different, right, intersecting points that like we can look at something and be like, I know that, I know what you're talking about there. And that's really what makes it a lot different, I think, for me. With AI art, though, I'm really into it. I'm into it because like I think I think AI art is a little bit closer to what we think of as white art. And that's mostly from what I understand. I don't know a lot of everything, but like AI can only generate what you put into it. Right. And so like it algorithmically like is inputted with the cultural norms of our country. And so I think it's really interesting to ask it to produce things because it's like, all right, this is what y'all be thinking about.
Which could be good or bad.
Right. I mean, I worked on this thing, right? When it first came on, Chat GPT first came out.
Yeah.
I would always go on, I would ask it, what is the race of its makers? Right. And when I first did it, I literally have to record it. So it's the creepiest thing. I first did it and it told me, it was like, this person's South African, this person's not, this person, this person. And I'd go back and ask like the same questions again. And it eventually told me it couldn't tell me anymore, that it was like, it doesn't see race or something like that. And so it's like interesting that like, I think AI is like interesting just because it's like also sort of adaptive and like strange and like that whole kind of little space I think is interesting.
Yeah. Now what about the value? And Max, this is an awesome question because I'm glad you reminded, brought this question up because it reminded me of some things that we needed to ask. But like, what about the value and like ownership? Because I hear some people say art in general should be like in the public domain and technically free. And then when you bring in the AI piece of it, then folks say, well, then that like has another layer to who owns this or like the authenticity of being able to try to copyright that.
Yeah.
Like, so how would you approach that? Like when it comes, and it's sort of a two-part question of like art, should art be public domain or should there be copyright and ownership and like should it be a revenue generating module at its heart?
Yeah.
Is that authentic art? Yeah.
I don't really, I'm gonna contradict myself because I sell work So like, and like it's how I make my living. So like,
yeah.
You hear this, like, don't stop. But I think the whole like market for art is like weird, and like it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I start like looking back at like other cultural norms around art, right? Like art as we know it right now, where you go get the gallery, you do, just anybody, I can just up and be like, today I'm gonna be this thing. It wasn't how it always was. Like there was other cultures, like I think about being in like Nigeria. I went to Nigeria a couple of years ago, and I was in Benin, where they made like the statues that are trying to get repatriated now. But you just couldn't make no statue. Like you had to be a trained artisan, right? And like you making that statue was associated with a whole ethos of life, right? Of like, right, both religious, both like right, communal, right? Both like institutional, all those things were what that art was. When you make the art just about dollars, it kind of loses all that spirit and energy that we put into it, right? You make this piece and it's about love and about struggle, and then you'd be like, all right, now 5 G's for it. Yeah. It's like yes, is it worth that value 100%? But like that in and of itself, that whole capitalism and all that kind of stuff, I think really sucks a lot of creativity out, because then what you start doing is like making stuff to make the money, and then you start like not really saying right what you want to say, and you have to play these games, and it's kind of like, yeah, if you take that out, you get to say whatever you want. But
yeah, okay,
yeah, deep, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, see, you probably thought this was gonna be like some little, some
statue
little,
melting and remolding and molding that.
No, bring it
into
up.
new
Go
art.
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm not trying to get you in any trouble. Yeah, but I've read things, probably talked to people, not by choice. Part of what I do said, that's just stupid. That's not art. What do you mean? There's already art when the statue was what it was, and you want to melt it and make it into something else that supposedly embodies a group or community or a city.
Yeah, that's deep. That's deep.
I think the whole conversation around public art, what I'm fascinated about, is how often certain people will really try to create spaces for us that are I want to say this correctly. I was driving, once I was driving down, I was driving some highway. I had to be towards Lynchburg, right? And I was driving past this station, or the stop, and it was called Lynch Station. And I took a picture of it. And I was like, man, this is crazy. Like, why would you have this thing being called Lynch Station? Like, in my mind, it takes me somewhere, right? All right. You could easily just change that name, and I would feel safe in that space. It'd be like, hey, like, look, that thing just makes me feel really unsafe because of these things, right? So it's like, why can't we just remove the things that make us feel unsafe, so that we can have spaces that we are all welcomed at, right? And so it's interesting to see moments where folks don't want other people to feel safe or hear their perspective or hear their side of it, right? So like, I think it's where we're at right now, right? Because I think we know a lot about the ways that our cities are built, are organized, and tell a history that, again, negates other people's history and narratives and stories, right? So, I mean, I can go back and forth with you on melt it, don't melt it, right? I think it's art either which way. So you're engaging with the conversation. I'm not one of thinking that like it's melted down, so now it's gone, because like the melting of it is like part of the story of where it got to. And like, so it's not like all of a sudden, like all of those ideas just evaporate out. Like it's just a statue that's gone, guys. Right. And it's going to be made into something else. And that'll be a part of the narrative and the story. And so I'm like interested in how we how we do that part, right?
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
seems
yeah.
we're very often latching on to trying to hold on to the past of what the South maybe once was, and maybe doesn't need to ever be again, and probably never will be, right? And so I think this transformation gives us a point of creating a new monument. Now, I'm just always been weary of all monuments, and I'm saying, okay, if we're going to create a monument, then like, what does that monument become, right? Like, what is it that we're going to create in this moment that will always be the thing we need to be there?
You should submit an idea to the Heritage Center of what it should become.
Yeah.
But I think always, like, eventually it won't be like useful. Like whatever like that's how I think about just monuments in general, right? Like build a monument and then like 70 years later, 100, 200, like, will that monument be the statement that thing needs?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it should just be melted down constantly. Maybe it's just like a cycle, never ends. Right. That'd be cool. But
yeah. And the bridge could also create an AI engine as well. You know what I mean? Like a diverse engine.
Listen, we're gonna make monuments. We're making AI. Listen, species bonnets.
Don't even worry about the bow.
Don't even worry about the bow. Listen.
Yeah. But I got to say this, you know, as we come to a close too, though, like in a way, history is art, and I'm gonna say something that's very unpopular, but we have an issue compartmentalizing history, because I agree when it comes to you don't want an edifice that seems to be edifying white supremacy and things of that sort. Totally agree with that. But we also need to compartmentalize that history happened. And just like we don't want anybody to erase our stories and our history, you know, just like we don't want to start at slavery, you know what I mean? There's history that we got to make sure that we're not trying to erase just because it's traumatic, just because it's hard to listen to or hard to, you know, like to visualize by it being a statue or whatnot. You see what I'm saying? It's like we got to compartmentalize without edifying. And I get the point where some people even said, well, then statues should be kept in a historic context, which I agree with that as well. Like whether you put them in a museum or making sure that it's not something that's like a beacon of your town and your city that's sitting on the highest plateau. You know what I mean? But I bring that up though, because it's still just like you wouldn't want anybody to judge your art. You know what I mean? It's a tough conversation, but it's like, it is what it is. And you can't erase what it was because if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. You know what I mean? Like that old adage. So I just think that we ride that fine line, and it makes me think of art, right? It's like, I may not agree with your art. Something about your art may rub me wrong. And whatever that creation may be, whatever that art form may be, it may rub me wrong, but that's your truth. And we just got to make sure that we're not erasing truth because the truth hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
seems like we need a lot of that constantly.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. That's all I got, Miss Max. You want to take us home?
I think it's good. All hearts and minds clear. No, do you have, you know, anything that you want to mention before we end the interview?
No, I just say, if you want to come check us out, we're at 306 East Main Street. Come by, hang out. We got Wi-Fi, we got computers, we got all the things that you may need. So come say hello. We're real.
Sounds like a great space. Can't wait to get by. So, thanks for joining us today.
We want Jay to leave here with the job. We ain't gonna be too long.
Let's see. We're gonna see tomorrow.
Early.
We'll see tomorrow.
You're good. We appreciate it. You know, but I think again, in a position like yourself, like people need authenticity, and I think they appreciate that. You know, because you know, like within the realms of respectful. You know,
right.
So I feel like this conversation was respectful, but it was at the same time abstract. Eye-opening, you know. So it was good. It was good. You enjoy yourself today?
Oh yeah, I did.
Good. Hopefully you come back.
Yeah, we talk more after once it starts rolling. Then we be like, all right.
Right. Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, actually, it's 3:00, Ms. Max.
Oh, is it?
Gotta check that watch.
Okay.
Go ahead and take us home, Ms. Max.
So, you know, I always give my same spiel at the end of each show, but I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank you for, you know, rocking with us past 3 hours and staying engaged, and finding some value in my humble opinion. I want to thank our guests, because they helped to make the show, willing to come in and talk about all these tough topics, and be as transparent and as honest as possible. That means a lot. Helps to serve what we do. And I just want to thank you. You know, everybody take care of each other. Charles, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but
I'm good.
That's it.
city, Charlottesville, stay well, stay safe, take care of each other. All right. See you next time.